conversation with you as well, specific to the role of UCA. Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, that ends
UC.
I'm sorry. Yep. I have Mr. Branson from the State 911 Program Coordinator. I'm sorry. I almost jumped over. You almost got out of here safe.
No problem. We can adjust this microphone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Darrell Branson, 911 Program Manager for the Public Utilities Commission. Per statute, the Commission is required to publish an annual State of 911 report in September of each year, followed by an in-person presentation in January. This is the Commission's 5th annual State of 911 report. Next slide, please. If the committee members take nothing else away from this presentation today, these are the key points that I would like to emphasize. First, the migration of Colorado's 911 network from a legacy analog technology based network to a modern IP-based network is essentially complete. This does not mean that our work is done, but this is an important first step in modernizing the state's 911 network that has been accomplished, and we can now look forward to promoting the implementation of advanced features and services that were not possible on our previous analog-based network. Second, a local stakeholder group facilitated by the Commission is continuing to plan for future deployment of advanced 911 technologies on the network. Third, the Commission is nearing a completion of a rulemaking to improve 911 network resiliency and reliability. And finally, current funding mechanisms are largely sufficient for now for local 911 costs. However, some statewide costs are left without a funding mechanism to pay for them. Next slide. Before we get to the key points, this slide is intended to provide a quick overview of what portions of the 911 service are regulated by the Commission and which portions are partially regulated and which portions are not regulated at all by the Commission. Statute provides that the Commission has clear authority over basic emergency service, which in simplified terms is the middle portion of the 911 call flow. 911 calls are received from callers by originating service providers, which are all of the companies that provide telephone service to end users. Those calls are then delivered to one company, CenturyLink, which also does business as Lumen Technologies, which aggregates all of the 911 calls, determines which 911 center to send them to, and delivers them along with associated location information. CenturyLink's role in this system is the portion of the 911 call flow that is regulated by the Commission. The Commission is also fully responsible for setting the state 911 surcharge on an annual basis and is responsible for collecting it from providers and distributing it to the 911 governing bodies at the local level. Under limited regulation, there is the wireless prepaid 911 charge and local emergency telephone charge. The prepaid rate is set annually by the Commission based on a formula prescribed in statute, but the Department of Revenue collects and distributes that charge. Local emergency telephone charges are set and collected by the state's 58 local 911 governing bodies. However, the Commission sets an annual threshold above which the Commission approval is required. The Commission also has audit authority regarding telecom provider collection and remittance of both the state 911 surcharge and the emergency telephone charge. Finally, under things that we do not regulate, the Commission is prohibited by statute from regulating originating service providers in most cases. For 911, this means that we do not receive outage reports from originating service providers, nor do we have direct authority to tell originating service providers how to handle 911 calls before they are handed off to CenturyLink for delivery to the 911 center. We also do not regulate the 911 centers themselves, including staffing, training, equipment, or any other aspect of local 911 call handling, which is primarily the responsibility of local agencies. This includes the use of emergency notification systems, commonly referred to as reverse 911. Next slide. Currently, we have 80...
Can I just ask a quick question about that? So local agencies regulate the 911 call centers. And does anybody provide oversight?
Representative, at this time, no. That is entirely the responsibility of local agencies and the entities that run those local agencies, being the municipalities and counties.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing, we currently have 85 primary and secondary 911 call centers or public safety answering points. The acronym is PSAP. And those PSAPs are funded primarily by 58 local 911 governing bodies. PSAPs in Colorado have service areas as small as a college campus to as large as multiple counties. Next slide. And we're going to skip this slide for time purposes. Today, 911 service with location information is available in every area of the state. Wireless 911 service requires that the caller have a cell signal wherever they are, but if they can get a signal, they can call 911, and in most cases, the caller's approximate location will be available to the call center. Text to 911 service is nearly ubiquitous when gauged by population, but, next slide, there are still a number of rural counties that do not provide text to 911 service. This map depicts text to 911 service availability in Colorado by 911 governing body. Text to 911 is an optional service in that there are no state or federal mandates requiring that a 911 center provide text to 911 service. However, the service is highly recommended, which is why we track the deployment of it. Next slide. The commission is the home.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we have a question from Rep. Marbury.
Thank you, Chairwoman Amable. Thank you for coming to present to us today. And, if the answer is that this isn't in your purview, maybe we can check in offline. In Denver, you may have seen in the Denver Post, there have been a lot of articles, and I've heard from constituents and members in the community that people are waiting a very long time when they dial 911. They're dialing 911, they're being put on hold. There's long response times. Is this something that your agency has any authority over, or have you been looking into this at all?
Mr. Branson.
Thank you, Chairwoman, Representative Mabry. The PUC does not have any authority over the operation of local agencies. I will just tell you that anecdotally I've heard from the local agencies that a lot of them are suffering from staffing shortages at this time.
Thank you.
Representative Leader.
To my best recollection, in 2007, 2008, I believe it was 7, an amendment was put on a bill on the pretty much close to the last day of session that defunded the Office of Consumer Counsel that has the oversight over the 911 services in a lot of the areas, meaning the private ones, if I'm remembering this correctly.
Mr. Branson.
Thank you, Chairwoman and Representative Leader. That was the case. However, it was last year or the year before that the Office of Utility Advocate is their name now, was given back authority to intervene in telecommunications matters, and they did participate in our recent rulemaking.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Rep. Leader.
So then would that be the office now that would have the oversight, as Representative Amabile was talking about, over the individual telecoms that don't really have an oversight? Where would that oversight lie?
Mr. Nicoletti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So actually, just for clarification, in the 2015 sunset of the Office of Consumer Counsel, the authority to advocate for consumers in the telecom space was removed from the Office of Consumer Counsel. That has been reestablished, but they never actually had a purview over the 911 system per se in that. That was just their ability to advocate on behalf of consumers in the telecom space that was removed and then has been put back in recent years.
Thank you.
Okay, I missed all that, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat it again. Any other questions? Are we done with? Oh, please proceed.
So continuing on, one of the committees of the task force that is housed within the Public Utilities Commission is the EZNet Users Group, which was created by order of the Commission to serve as a forum of local 911 stakeholders to oversee the implementation of the Emergency Services IP network and future adoption of next-generation 911 services and features in the state. To facilitate this, the Users Group has recently published its first edition of the Next Generation 911 Strategic Plan, which will be updated annually. This strategic plan can be used by the state's current or potential service providers to prioritize future feature development and service offerings to meet the needs of the state's 911 call centers. It can also serve as a document to support applications for future federal grants. Next slide. Regarding 911 network reliability, there were 11 outages within the portion of the 911 network that the Commission regulates in fiscal year 2022. Note that the outages that prevent 911 calls from even reaching the 911 network are not represented in our statistics because we are unable to compel reporting from the originating service providers. Just recently, the Federal Communications Commission began providing state agencies with access to its network outage reporting system, which all telecommunications providers are required to report to. This means that starting with next year's report, we should be able to provide the legislature with a much clearer picture of the health of the entire 911 call flow, not just the middle portion of the call flow that falls within the Commission's jurisdiction. In 2022, we also went through an extensive rulemaking process to strengthen the Commission's rules regarding 911 network reliability and to leverage the existing state 911 surcharge to fund improvements to the 911 network without negatively impacting the budgets of local 911 governing bodies. Those rules have been finalized, and unless any objections are filed, we anticipate that they will become effective on March 1st. Next slide. This chart shows the number of outages within the portion of the 911 call flow that is provided by CenturyLink by calendar year. The number of basic emergency service outages in calendar year 2022 stands at 9, which is the lowest number of outages experienced since 2017. Next slide. In addition to the Commission's official activities regarding 911 network reliability, the Commission's 911 task force also conducts special investigations into outages that meet certain thresholds. The revised rules recently issued by the Commission move the responsibility for these investigations from the task force to Commission staff. The goal of these investigations is and will continue to be to provide actionable recommendations to both CenturyLink and local 911 agencies to help reduce the number of outages or to mitigate the impact of future outages on the public. Next slide. Moving on to funding, this chart shows the different sources of 911 funding in Colorado. First, the state 911 surcharge, which was implemented in January of 2021, is set annually by the Commission. Second, statute allows local 911 governing bodies to impose an emergency telephone charge, which can be set at any rate up to and including a threshold set annually by the Commission. If a governing body finds it necessary to impose a charge higher than the threshold, it can file an application with the Commission demonstrating need for a higher charge to pay for eligible expenses. As a result, emergency telephone charge rates vary widely depending on where in Colorado you live, with rates of 70 cents per line per month on the low end and $3 per line per month on the high end, with one governing body having recently been approved for $4 per line per month starting in February of this year. Notably, most of the higher rates can be found in the rural areas of the state where costs per capita of providing 911 service are higher. Third, the prepaid wireless 911 charge is set by the Commission annually based on a formula provided in statute. This rate is applied per transaction every time a customer purchases prepaid wireless telecommunications service. As stated in our written report, there is a concern that a flat per transaction rate may disproportionately impact lower income consumers who may be forced by financial necessity to purchase service more often in smaller increments. But changing the per transaction nature of this rate would require a statutory change. Finally, any cost for providing 911 service that isn't covered by the 3 different surcharges listed here must be covered by local governments. Based on survey data, we estimated that in 2021, approximately $32 million had to be invested by city and county governments to complete the funding of 911 service to their residents and visitors. It should be noted that both the state 911 surcharge and prepaid wireless 911 charge are collected at the state level, but all 911 funding is distributed to the local level. Next slide. One of the statutory requirements of the State of 911 report is that it include gaps or challenges that need to be addressed. Item number 1 on this list is the ongoing implementation of advanced 911 services. As users of the system become to expect more advanced services, it will be up to the 911 centers and the provider of the 911 network to meet those needs, with the Commission advancing those goals through rulemaking, adjudication of changes to the service tariff, and through facilitation of statewide planning. Number 2 refers to the fact that the Commission does not have statutory authority to require outage reporting from originating service providers. This item will likely be removed from next year's report as we can begin providing the FCC outage data in our report. Item number 3 refers to the fact that Colorado is in a small minority of states that have no minimum standards for operation of public safety answering points. By this, I mean that there are no minimum training standards for 911 call takers in Colorado. There are also no requirements regarding minimum staffing, call answer time, provision of pre-arrival medical instructions, provision of foreign language interpretation, or text to 911 service. Most of our 911 centers are doing a good job on all of these measures voluntarily, but without a minimum standard, the service received by the caller may vary greatly depending on where they are when they dial 911. Item number 4 refers to the fact that while we believe that most 911 centers in the state are following best cybersecurity practices and are adequately protecting their systems from intrusion and disruption, we have no mechanism to ensure that this is the case or to support PSAPs that may need additional assistance in this area. Finally, item number 5 refers to the fact that a statewide geographic information system data set for 911 call routing does not exist. And currently there is no funding mechanism to pay for the development of such a statewide GIS data system. The development of such a data set is a requirement for the future deployment of next generation 911. With the exception of item number 2, all of the challenges listed here would potentially benefit from a state level funding source in addition to the existing local funding sources currently provided for by statute. Colorado is currently one of only 9 states that have no mechanism to pay for state-level 911 expenses. Next slide. Finally, I want to address the issue of location-based routing because it is an important issue that has been in the news this year. Traditionally, wireless 911 calls have been routed to a 911 center based on the location of the cell tower. If a cell tower serves an area that is split between 2 or more 911 centers, this means that a caller may sometimes be routed to the wrong 911 center for their area and have to be transferred. This can add seconds to the response time, and in an emergency, sometimes seconds can mean the difference between life and death. The major wireless carriers have responded by beginning to route 911 calls based on the location of the caller rather than the location of the cell tower. And the Federal Communications Commission, which regulates wireless providers, has also taken a renewed interest in this topic and is currently considering rules to make location-based routing a requirement. However, location-based routing by wireless carriers is considered a temporary solution. The long-term solution is to enable location-based routing in the 911 network itself. This requires a statewide 911 GIS data set as discussed on the previous slide. Next slide. This concludes my presentation, and if anybody has any further questions, I would be happy to try to answer those. Thank you.
Representative Mobley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you have a legislative agenda around this 911, these fixes, or, I mean, are you asking the legislator to act on that, or no?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Branson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Emil,
Mobley.
I answered anything, really.
sorry about that.
I think the ask was just now.
There is some draft legislation that was put forward by the Commission's 911 Advisory Task Force, which is a stakeholder group they are currently working with the sponsors. My understanding, the Public Utilities Commission itself has not taken a position on that legislation, but what that legislation would do would be to create that state-level funding mechanism that I talked about.
Thanks.
Representative Leader.
Do you have anything in regards to outages?
Mr. Branson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Leader, can you clarify your question? What we...
So if there's 911 outages, is there a certain time frame in which they need to be fixed? Does the carrier have to have a way to know where the outage happened at?
Mr. Branson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Leader, thank you for the clarification. The Commission does have rules regarding 911 outages, specifically of the outages that occur in the portion of the system that is regulated by the Commission. And a lot of the outages that occur do not occur in that portion of the network. However, the ones that do, we require a 2-hour reporting from the 911 system service provider or basic emergency service provider, which is CenturyLink in Colorado. They have to provide us with a final 30-day report as well with details regarding what caused the outage, what they did to mitigate the outage, what they did to correct the outage, and so forth. And as I mentioned, some outages that meet certain criteria also undergo a special investigation process.
Representative Leader.
What about the other companies other than CenturyLink? There's other companies that have VoIP services when you dial 911. I know sometimes they'll bounce over to Canada before they come back. And do they have to have any specifics within their outages? Where if they have a fiber loop, is that a continuous fiber loop? Can it reroute to the other way? Do they know where, on that fiber loop where it's broken at, or is there anything around that?
Mr. Branson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Leader, all of those types of services fall under the category of originating service providers, which were all deregulated in 2014, and we do not have the statutory authority to require reporting from them. The Federal Communications Commission does receive reporting from them, however, and we do now have access starting in September of last year to those reports that the FCC receives.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, that concludes. Congratulations, guys. You're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.